Well, good morning and welcome to another fine Saturday, wherever you may be. If you're tuning in live and joining us, then welcome right now live. And if you're tuning in later on, welcome. I don't know why I had to differentiate that just to say welcome, probably because I'm still waking up. And as you may be able to tell from the background and from the cup I'm holding, not at home, not in the usual spot, at a hotel. I'll fill you in a little bit more on that in a couple of minutes. But for now, just know that it's that time. So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it's time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. All right, I said I'd fill you in, so I'm going to fill you in. First of all, good morning. Welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve on this Saturday, July 22nd, 2023. And we are actually on the road this weekend visiting family in the Portland, Oregon area. So typically I'm broadcasting from home in Spokane, Washington. Our grandsons, our oldest grandsons, Remy and Jameson, have been visiting with us for the last 3 weeks or so. I'm going to be here for another couple of weeks. And this was a trip that we planned with them and for them before they even got into town to visit us, to go see our daughter Carissa and her family in the Vernonia, Oregon area. So we're kind of in the Beaverton-ish area, if you're familiar. If you're not familiar with any of those places, that's fine. Just take it all in. But we arrived yesterday with some stops along the way. Some of my family will appreciate this, but first let me say hello to Carissa. Hi, Kathy. Jerry Thompson is here. Um, I know that my sister Kathy will appreciate this, and if any of my other family are on or watch this later, we drove in through the Columbia Gorge, and so we crossed over from the Oregon side. Yeah, we started in Washington, went to the Oregon side to be on 84. And again, if this makes sense to you, great. If not, just follow the story. It's kind of fun. And then we crossed at the John Day Bridge, and there is a memorial. It's a war memorial, but it's designed like Stonehenge, a smaller version of Stonehenge that's in England, and it's up above Goldendale, Washington. And when we were young, we went up there on some occasions. I don't remember exactly when it was built. Kathy, I don't know if you recall if we ever went to the Stonehenge Memorial when we were kids, or if that was built later, but we took our kids there, and we took the boys over there so they could see it. And then a few miles away from there is the Maryhill Museum, and we took the boys to the museum, spent some time there. And I always appreciate the fact, because we went to the Maryhill Museum when I was a kid, and there's a lot there that's not, I mean, there's not anything or much that's really hands-on. They've added some sections that are more education centers where you can do coloring, drawing, painting, and that kind of stuff, because it's primarily a museum of art. But it's art from a variety of things. There are some exhibits there that were presented by the Queen of Romania back when over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago, when the museum first opened. There are Native American, indigenous peoples artifacts. There is an exhibit of small miniature mannequins with Parisian designs that was post-World War II. There's a variety of art on the wall, etc. But anyway, it's not something that always you would think, well, a little kid's going to enjoy this, or a young person's going to enjoy this. Remy and Jameson, now they're 13 and 12, so it's not like they're little kids. But our kids appreciated going there when they were younger than Remy and Jameson. But we spent some time at the Maryhill Museum, and then stopped in the Dalles for a late lunch, and then came on into the Portland area. And so it's fun to kind of introduce. Oh, we did, by the way, after we left Maryhill Museum, we took a little drive down into Wishram, which is where I lived for the first 5 years of my life. My dad worked for the railroad. Wishram is a very small railroad town on the Washington side. Boy, it is changed. I mean, there's certain things that haven't changed at all. A lot more run down. The house that we lived in when I was very small burned down a number of years ago, and I remember going into Wishram once and just seeing the pad there where the house had been. Now I can't even be sure I was spotting the exact right property, because they put some manufactured homes and stuff, 2 or 3 of them in that area. I know I was in the right general area to point out to the boys, but it was tough. Anyway, just all of that to say, we're on the road, we're traveling, and we're going to be visiting family after the show today. I'm going to breeze past special days this time, because we have a pre-recorded conversation with our guest that I want to get to right away. And so I've probably already jabbered long enough so that we don't go too far over time. But I want to just remind you that if you do have a special day this week, would you please put it in the chat so that we can celebrate and acknowledge that with you? And if you have a special day coming up sometime later in the month of July, or possibly even in the month of August, you can email me so that I make sure I have that information and that we can include that in our special days and the proper point coming up. So, what else was I going to say? I don't know that I'm going to say anything else right now about that. Just glad that you're here. Is there anybody else that has joined us in the last few minutes here? I know we've got people on vacation. Kathy Garlic, are you still traveling right now? Are you tuning in from afar, or are you back home now? I know that you were on the, okay, greetings from Las Vegas. Sorry, I had jumped too far ahead. Good. Yeah. And I know that you're dealing with some relatively warm weather in Las Vegas. Listen, let me get to our guest. I'm going to continue to make comments here and greet people after as I'm able. But let me tell you a little bit about our guest, and he's actually on here in the background right now. I think I'm not positive. I thought I saw him sign in. I can see who signs in on the phone, and I thought I saw him sign in, but maybe not. But anyway, let me tell you a bit about Sean Cullen Carroll. After serving as a public school music teacher for 7 years, Sean built an award winning real estate sales practice from zero to over 5.5 million in sales volume in 12 months. All of this during the great real estate recession of 2008 2009. Once his career started to blossom, Sean realized how entrepreneurial he actually was. And I should throw in, although it's not in this bio, Sean actually, you're going to hear him talk a little bit, he was doing entrepreneurial things from the time he was about 17. But anyway, he found out how entrepreneurial he actually was, started his own coaching and training company in 2009, focusing on the solopreneur niche, the solopreneur. It's entrepreneurs who are doing it on their own. Over the next few years, he built a busy coaching practice and an online presence that enabled him to leverage his expertise, grow his income, and have more flexibility with his time. So at the age of 40, a few years ago, just before the pandemic, Sean decided to enter the world of professional acting and found success in New York, including having featured in lead roles in productions in New York of Curtains, You're in Town, Anything Goes, Company, Kiss Me Kate, Pajama Game, and Fiddler on the Roof, among other stage presentations that he's done. Recently, Sean and his wife, Tanya, decided to finally partner up and build a business together. So, in addition to being the quote, chief of all husbandry things, Sean is also the head of business development, chief of staff for a company called HR Kickstart. Sean considers himself a student of innovation, technology, social and business trends, and all things musical and performing arts. He believes this makes him a more authentic marketer and more valuable to his clients and his audiences. Sean believes that life is meant to be enjoyed and that the line between work and play should be blurry. If it's fun, it just doesn't feel so much like work. So, I had an opportunity recently to have a conversation with Sean, and found him to be extraordinarily fascinating. And so, right now, I want to share with you my conversation with Sean Cullen Carroll. Remind you that while this is pre-recorded, you can still make your comments and ask your questions in the chat. We'll still have this be all part of the conversation, and Sean will be able to, if he's on today, he will be able to comment and reply to those. And if he tunes in later, he'll still be able to get on the chat. So here's the conversation. All right. Well, I want to welcome Sean Cullen Carroll to Coffee Breaks with Steve. And Sean, thanks for being here today.
Of course, Steve. Appreciate the invite. I'm excited to be here. Been looking forward to this.
Well, I have too. And, Sean and I got to meet just recently, have gotten to know each other a little bit. And Sean, your story is absolutely fascinating in every single aspect. I mean, you're one of those people whose story has so many facets to it that it's almost difficult to know where to start. But I think one of the things that's intriguing to me, and I think to the people who tune in and watch Coffee Breaks, is you're a businessman, you're an entrepreneur, but you're also an actor and have done professional acting. And that wasn't something that started in your youth. It's not like you grew up doing the acting thing or went to college specifically to be an actor. It was something that you started a little bit later in life. And I'd kind of like to let you just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned that there's a saying for people that do what I did, and it's called second act actors.
Really?
So it's meaning, that acting was not your first maybe career path or journey, but like as you're starting the second act, hopefully I have many acts to come. But yeah, I started professionally. My first professional job as an actor did not occur until I was 42. So I started the pursuit when I was 40, and it took me a couple of years to learn the business, get my skill set up. And how it all came about, when I was in high school, I did do musical theater, but just as the high school theater kid.
Yeah.
And I loved it, absolutely loved it, and always thought that it was something that I wanted to do. But the thought of doing it as a career, for a variety of reasons, was not something that entered my mind back then. So I went to school, took a little more of a practical route, got an education degree, and I did end up teaching music. So I was sort of in the vicinity. Yeah. But I always had this drive towards business and wanting to kind of create and build. And so I started my own business when, that was, around 2002, 2003. Did that for quite a while. And then one year I was just having a really great year in business, but I was feeling more and more depressed, and I could not figure out why. I was working with a therapist at the time, and I brought it up and I said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. And she said, if you could do anything at all right now for fun, what would it be? And without hesitation, the first thing I said is I would do a musical. And I didn't think, I wasn't even thinking about musicals, but it just came out of me. And she said, well, then you should do a musical. Yeah. And I said, come on, what are you talking about? I don't have any time for that. I got a business going on, that takes a serious investment of time, and I wouldn't even know where to look. She said, you live in New York City. Someone has to be doing a musical somewhere in New York City. And she was right. So I immediately auditioned for this community theater production of Fiddler on the Roof. Huh? I didn't have a headshot or a resume. I didn't know really what I needed to do. It turns out community theater in New York City, there's a lot of options, but it's also very competitive because there's a lot of people who are using that, right, as a way to get known. So I auditioned. I got cast in a featured role, and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And so I didn't close the business or anything like that. I just decided, well, let me audition for another one. So I did 2 or 3 more community theater shows, and then I started working with a coach. That was once I realized I was serious about what I was doing. I hired a coach in New York who helped me get ready, get the audition materials ready, learn how to audition better. And I hit professional auditions for 2 years until someone finally took a chance on me. So that was ages 40 to 42. And then I was working pretty much nonstop until the pandemic happened. And then again, after the pandemic. So I've been very fortunate. It's been, it's exceeded my expectations in terms of what I thought was possible.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, and it kind of resonates with me because I'm another one of those people. I did the high school stuff. I did a little bit of community theater out of high school and in my very young adult years, and then have participated in, I don't know the best way to put this, church productions, family productions. There's a whole different conversation about the stuff that my family and I have put together on our own. But that idea of then trying to get out there later in life and say, okay, I want to get back into this. And the things you mentioned about at some point, you just have to step out there and take a risk with that. But you also talked about getting a coach, which is another thing I've considered recently, because I discovered, strangely enough, that here in Spokane, Washington, which you wouldn't think of as being some major metropolitan, performing arts area, they have several community theaters, and they are all at least semi-professional and very competitive. Wow. And I came here thinking, I'll just step out there. They're always looking for men to be in these, and they are. But I'm finding that it's a little more intimidating than I thought it was going to be. So the things that you're sharing are resonating with me. I did want to ask you, you said you did the musicals in high school. What musicals do you recall doing in those high school days?
My very first show was actually a play. I don't recall the name of the play, but I got cast as a juggler. And the way that I got cast as a juggler was they asked on the audition form, would you be willing to learn how to juggle? And I just checked yes.
Smart.
And so I got cast.
Smart.
Then the first musical I did was Sound of Music.
Okay.
And I was cast as one of the German. I had a few lines later in the show. I think he was a German admiral, had a few lines. Then we did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
Who were you in that?
I was ensemble.
Okay.
That was interesting because everybody kept saying, you're going to be Charlie Brown. I was convinced that I was going to be handed Charlie Brown. So of course I didn't get Charlie Brown, and I was so devastated when in reality it was my second musical. So as a sophomore. So of course I wasn't going to get the lead, but and then what really my breakout year was my senior year, where I was cast as Curly and Fiddler on the Roof. So I got, or no, Curly in Oklahoma, not Fiddler.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof. I had on
Curly.
the brain. That was,
No,
so yeah,
Fiddler on the Roof. Who were you in Fiddler?
I was Avram, the bookseller.
The bookseller.
Yeah.
Well, you had some, I mean, those are those high school roles, because that's always, it's a good microcosm, and it's a good prep for trying to get out there in real life theater, because I recall, you can have a featured role in one musical and be ensemble in the next. You can be the romantic lead in one show, and the next time your background character doesn't even have a name. And it's humbling. And sometimes I remember as a student, and even watching my kids as students going through the same thing, that was almost, it's almost frustrating. It's kind of like you got to be on a sports team. You were the starter one year, and then you sit on the bench the next or something. And it's like, no, but that's real life. I mean, that's real life in theater, and that's real life in business and a lot of other things too, right?
Absolutely. It's the levels thing is something that I think about often, because I'm a big fan of sports. Mainly as I've gotten older, I've become less of a fan of sports and more of a student of it. So I like watching professional athletes, the most successful, in studying what they do. And I've noticed so many parallels that I've taken into the theater world and also into business. And that is, if you're the best actor, musical theater actor at your high school, wherever that is, and then you go, and let's say you go to college for musical theater, well, everybody that probably is at that college was the best at their high school, right? And it just keeps going. So when I got to the professional ranks, I kind of already knew that, which helped me, because at the professional ranks, if they don't know you, especially, they're not going to take a risk. Even if you're right for the role, you're probably going to be cast as the understudy to that role until they get to know you.
Yeah.
And then I learned there's a whole niche you can be in the professional theater world, of somebody who's able to learn 2 or 3 tracks and be that supporting featured swing. Right. Exactly. And that's a huge asset. And you can work for a very long time doing that. Of course, we all love
get
playing
to know.
the leads,
you get to know and get to be known by directors and casting agents and others. I mean, that's a tremendous, because I think so often, and again, this is true in theater, it's true in business, it's true in life, that we think, well, I've got to be the person. I've got to be the star. I've got to be the most valuable player. And sometimes that's a misnomer, isn't it? Because most valuable isn't always the C-level person in a corporation. And very often it's not. I mean, I've had this conversation with people. I think we've talked about it on here, that the person working in those administrative support capacities in a business, the CEO can be gone for weeks and the business will still run, but that executive administrative person, or the person who knows where everything is, leaves for a day and the place can fall apart, right?
That's very true. Yeah. And that's definitely true in a theater production as well. Definitely true in business. In fact, I think if I've done my job as a leader in business, that I should be able to step away. I shouldn't be the biggest point of failure, that if I step out of the business, it crumbles, because then we have some things we have to fix. Yeah. So, but being that was, I think, what helped me work so consistently as an actor, is my willingness to be that strong utility player, to use a sports analogy.
Yes.
The person that can step in, play a lot of different positions if need be, but who's going to know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, is going to show up early and stay late if need be. And director after director, because I always ask for feedback and like, what can I do better? And one of the things that they always tell me about what they value is, you're my rock. I always know you're, like, if I tell you something once, I know it's done. I don't have to worry about you. And that alone, that word gets around about that kind of stuff. And so then when there is a lead role opportunity that director is considering me for, and they have to sell me to a producer or a team who doesn't know me, they're able to get, hey, I've worked with this guy. He played 4 roles for me. He was always there. And then next thing you know, I have an opportunity that I wouldn't have otherwise had, because I was willing to be that utility player.
And the rest of the cast can count on you too. I mean, that goes a long way when they know that you're not going to be the person that flakes out and lets them down. And that's a tremendous value.
Yeah.
What are some of the key life lessons that you've learned from acting, from theater?
Oh, so many. It's probably the most enlightening and challenging personal development journey I think I've ever been on. And I've done a lot of personal development over the years. The biggest ones are just, we were just alluding to it a minute ago, is focus on your job, what you can control. That in the acting world, there's so many things, especially about even getting the job, that are out of your control. Whereas in business, there are things out of my control, but I have a lot more say in what I do in my business than I do when I'm going for a role in a production. So just really learning to, what are the controllables, and then master those. And if I've mastered those, and then the second part would be consistency, the importance of consistency, that you can't audition for someone once and expect that they're just going to remember who you are and everything you bring to the table. And in business, that applies with sales. You can't just follow up with someone one time in the world of where most people make decisions in 7th through 12th contact. So consistency, really knowing the controllables. And then I think also not tying my worth into the results that I'm getting. So really learning how to value myself as a human being, disconnected from whether or not I book the job. Because with auditioning for theater, you're truly putting yourself out there, yourself. It is, sure, you're singing a piece, you're doing a monologue, but it's you. You're bringing, if you're doing it right, you're bringing everything of you to that role and to that character, and living through it. And so when you don't land the job, or when you get some feedback that hurts a little bit, it's extremely challenging to not internalize that and take it personally. And I won't say that I've mastered it, but I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. And that's helped me in life when a similar situation occurs, that I can look and say, did I do everything I could? Was that in my control or not? If it was, can I change it? No. Okay, move on. All that stuff. Yeah. So it's truly been, and my wife will attest to this. It's been, it's definitely like, the Himalayan mountains. You're on super high one day, and the next day you feel like you're never going to get anywhere. And then little by little it gets easier, and those peaks and valleys get a little bit easier to manage.
Boy, that's a key life lesson right there, right? I mean, we're all always aiming for the pinnacle, and the reality is sometimes for the longest time, all we're really doing is switchbacking to try to get some altitude, right?
Yeah.
And when you switch back, you keep crossing some of the same crevasses and other obstacles again, but each time you do, you're at a slightly higher level, and you say, okay, I've dealt with this before. I kind of understand what I need to deal with this time. I've been across this obstacle in life. And so it becomes a little, it's why, age is one of those things that a lot of people resist, but with age comes experience, and it comes sometimes a little bit more patience with ourselves, if not the circumstances. Hopefully the circumstances too. For sure. You've shared with me that you've alluded to this as we've been talking about acting, but you've been an entrepreneur much of your life. I was going to say your adult life, but really almost since before you were fully an adult. What prompted that? Is it just an aspect of, you think, well, this is my character, I've got to be doing this? And what are some of the things that you've pursued in your entrepreneurial career? Yeah,
I remember being 16 years old and watching some infomercial about flipping real estate with no money down, and like using my dad's credit card to buy it. So because I was like, I got to learn how to do this. Like, I don't know, maybe a lot of 16-year-olds do that. I don't think it's happens for everybody, but I remember that very vividly. And he wasn't even mad about it. He was like, okay, it was like $197 or something, which in 1980 something was a lot more than it is now. So I remember that vividly. But there's two things that I recall. One is working for my stepfather, who was self-employed. He ran a heating and air conditioning business, and I used to work with him in the summers. And I remember one summer we went on vacation we had a week's vacation. We rented this house on the Chesapeake Bay, very modest house, but it was, we were going to go away for a week. And then towards the end of the week, he said, hey, do you guys want to go, you want to stay for another week? And I remember thinking, how can we do that? Like, everybody has work. And he's like, no, I'll just, I'll call my colleagues and we'll just shift things around. And then he explained to me what self-employment meant. And I didn't know anything about business, but I said,
that light bulb went off.
Yeah, I was like, that's what I want to do. Whatever this is, That's what I want to do, because I just loved that the reason I loved it is we were able to stay together as a family for another week, and that's what really resonated with it emotionally for me. And then the other memory was helping my mom sell Mary Kay when I was about 11 years old. So she, single mother before she got remarried, needing to make extra money.
Okay.
And she started doing this thing called Mary Kay, which I didn't know anything about. I just knew it was makeup. And she's like, hey, do you want to come with me to one of my sales parties? And I said, okay, I'll go with you. So she always says I was her secret weapon, because I would go and not only were you super cute and people started to feel like they should buy my stuff, but I was helping her close the sales. Because one person was like,
you would tell people how great they looked when they
I'd be like, you got to get this. It's perfect for you. And I'm like 11 years old.
Yeah.
So clearly there was something going on in my DNA that was geared towards that, but it started that early. And as I got older, I took a more traditional route. As I said, I went into teaching, and I love to teach. I love the art of teaching. I did not love the regimented life of a public school teacher. It just wasn't for me. And the whole time I'd always had some type of side hustle. I was flipping baseball cards. I was investing in Legos. I was always doing something on the side.
Wow.
So finally, after a lot of doing everything on the side, I decided what would happen if I just went for something full time. And so in 2005, I started a real estate sales business, because that course that I bought years ago stuck with me. And I thought, let me get into the business that I'm most interested in. So that was the first full-time entrepreneurial venture I started. I was about 28 years old, and then it failed miserably in the first 3 years because we hit the recession. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But since then, I've always been self-employed. So that's now we're going almost 20 years to where I've been responsible for creating my own income. And I always say now I think I'm kind of unemployable. So I don't think I would do so well with, having to show up at certain times, doing certain things. I think eventually that's not going to work out.
And right now, and it's in your profile under your name here, there's a little clue to this, but it's interesting because now, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. I have something else I want to approach first, but you're in a business with your wife, and you're doing business together. And I want to come back to that, because for some people, they'd say there is no way that I would go into business with my spouse full time.
I understand.
Now we're going to talk about that a little bit. But before we get to that, you mentioned, the recession hitting. And I kind of wanted to ask you, with that and maybe some other things, what are some of the biggest challenges? Because when people hear this, they kind of go, well, this guy, he had it all together from the time he was a kid. He had it made in business. He had it made as an actor. It almost sounds to people like it all has just come together for you and always worked out. What are some of the biggest challenges and drawbacks that you have faced in business, in life? What are some of those hard lessons, and how has that helped to further equip you for success in life?
Well, I'll preface this by saying that any of the wisdom that seems to be coming out of my mouth now was earned through loss, pain, disappointment, mistakes, challenges, putting it lightly. So there have been plenty of those, and there's probably plenty more of those to come. And that's where I've really found out who I am, and learned from it. So the biggest ones I mentioned, I started that first full-time entrepreneurial venture, in 2005. Well, I was always interested in real estate. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just try this part-time. I had some friends selling real estate part-time. It didn't look that hard to me. So I jumped in, sold a few houses, thought I was a genius. I looked at how much money I made selling those properties and how much money I was making as a school teacher at the time. And I thought, well, this is an easy choice. The problem is that the reason I was selling those houses was not because of my business skill. It was because of what the market was doing, was charging like a big time bull market in real estate.
Yeah.
That all changed. What I was doing was I was taking money that I was making and we were investing it in bad real estate choices, because I was greed. It was all greed. I was just chasing more money. Nothing wrong with chasing money, but I was putting it into deals that did not make sense. So the recession comes, the worst we've seen in my lifetime, probably since the Great Depression, where real estate was at the center of it, and everything collapsed. All of our investments collapsed. We're upside down. We had multiple properties foreclosed on. Our personal residence we had to sell. We just sold it at a break even. I'm grateful for that.
Wow.
But we got hurt pretty bad. My net worth at the time before all of this happened was well north of $2 million in property. But again, a lot of it was, I won't say it was fake, because had I sold those properties, it would have been very much real,
Right.
but it wasn't sustainable.
Mm.
So we went completely belly up. I remember sitting in front of the bankruptcy attorney and him saying, Mr. Carroll, real estate is a wonderful business, but right now you have a huge income problem. And so maybe it's time you did something else. And my wife was there, and she had perfect credit. So I had to look at her, and she had to make the decision whether she was going to go on this sinking ship with me financially or tell me this is your problem. So she decided to ride the wave down with me.
Wow.
She's like, we're in this together, man. Like we're going to come out together. We're going in together. Like, let's do it. So had to rebuild from zero, below zero. Also during this time, what was fueling some of those bad decisions was my father passed away when I was 24, and I went into a downward spiral of drinking, of depression. It was not a good time for me. And so right around I was making all of these bad decisions was at the height of my drinking problem. So it was like one was feeding the other, right?
Right.
Finally, I actually learned how to sell. I realized, okay, if I'm going to be successful, I can either, go back and get a job and try to piece this together, or I can learn this real estate thing and actually do it right. So I figured out, well, if I'm having these problems with upside down properties, maybe there's other people I can help who will relate to me because I went through these problems. And it was just a hunch that I had. So I went and went to this training that I didn't have the money for, learned how to sell distressed properties. And within 2 years, I was the number one agent in my office and probably top 5% in the area. So my hardship led to the experience, which led to the success. Mm-hmm. And so I lean on that today when something bad happens in business, or I have an audition that doesn't go well. I have so much to draw on from that period of my life where I just go, okay, well, I'm still alive. I'm sober today. My wife's still with me. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, this is not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So I draw on that constantly. So I don't think we ever have it fully together. And I there were many times during that journey where, I really wasn't sure, like, were we going to make it to the next month? Like, were we literally going to be homeless? Like, we had those conversations. I remember my wife saying, like, she was running the tape in her head of what, like, if we do this, like, well, I guess we could be in the shelter together. Like, she was running the tape through.
Yeah.
So thankfully that never happened. But it could have. Like, it
close. Puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I mean, really those moments in life really cause you to take stock of what's important, what's truly important. And, I mean, it does, as you said, having money isn't a bad thing. I had a mentor who taught me, he said, it's not bad to have money. It's bad if money has you. Amen. And it's true of any of the material things that we sometimes get so attached to, we get accustomed to, and we take for granted, don't we? I mean, if things are going smoothly, it's all just right there at our fingertips. And something happens that takes some of those things away, either takes them away completely or puts them in a place where the taking for granted is no longer there for us. And we have to kind of stop and say, what's really important in life? And, you mentioned, I mean, I applaud both you and your wife in this process. Sean, why do you think, I mean, you're being very transparent about some of these things, and talking about going through that kind of financial struggle, going through the substance issues that you went through, and some of the things you dealt with. Why for you is it important to be transparent about those things when you're even sharing with people, maybe in business settings or just in life settings? Why is that a big deal for you?
It's how I learned to get sober, was just radical honesty. It was that approach saved my life, because up until that point, I was the opposite, where I was constantly scheming and constantly trying to remember what I said to you. And was it the same thing? Like getting my stories right. And that behavior led me pretty close to the grave. You know, I was on a very rough trajectory. And so when I got sober, I learned that to be free of that, I needed to be honest with myself, and I needed to be honest with the world about who I was, when it's appropriate to share what needs to be shared, that I shouldn't run from the truth. Now, there's a time and a place for all pieces of my story or your story. Like, not everything needs to be shared with everybody all the time. But the reason I do it publicly in forums like this is because every time I do, inevitably I'll get a private message from someone who will say, thank you for telling your story, because I have a story, or it's my mother-in-law, or it's my somebody, and you gave me hope. You showed me what's possible. And so once I started to see that was happening, it was apparent to me that the reason a lot of the 12-step programs talk about step 12 of sharing the message with others is because that's how we all heal. Is I need to see an example of that it's okay that you went through something. It doesn't mean you're less of a person.
Right.
In business, now I don't go into every sales meeting for HR Kickstart and talk about my past drinking problems. You know, that's I don't lead with that.
Right.
But if it comes up, it comes up. And sometimes, you know, I'll be in someone's office and I'll see that they have, you know, something on their desk that lets me know they're in recovery. And so I'll just look at it and I'll look at them and just give them, you know, like one of these. Yeah. It creates connection. So
yes, it does.
And honestly, to be totally honest, it's for selfish reasons, because the demons that I'm afraid of people finding out are the things that are going to keep me stuck in life. So if I just beat everybody to the punch and say, yeah, I know. Yeah, I did that. It's all like, there wasn't that much on the internet in 1997, 98, thank goodness. But if there was, I'm sure it would be there. You know, some of the things I said to people or wrote. And so it's just easier to live this way. I can look in the mirror and be comfortable most days. You know, I'm not perfect, but
none of us have, you said it, you said, you know, none of us are there. None of us have finished becoming. We're still in process, right? That's what life is, we never stop being in process. So I love those messages. Thank you for sharing those.
Of course.
You're in business with your wife.
I am.
I mean, you've been an entrepreneur. Your wife has been in business in a variety of capacities. And I just wanted to take a few minutes for you to share a little bit about how that happened. You mentioned the pandemic in terms of your acting, but I just wanted to hear a little bit about this business venture that you and your wife decided to start, how the pandemic affected that, and what it's like to work closely with your spouse.
We're still learning what it's like every day, right? So the pandemic brought my acting career to a halt, like it did for most of us. And it forced me to reevaluate what I was going to do with my days. I was not about to sit around and wait for the government or whoever to tell me that I could pursue something. So I immediately just thought, well, if I can't do this, what can I do? And because I've always been entrepreneurial, I started, you know, some of those pursuits again, working with some people, coaching some people, consulting. And then my wife at the time, who was working full-time as an employee inside of a company as a vice president of HR, started to get some calls from her past colleagues saying, hey, would you come consult for us? Because, you know, they had to let some people go or they needed some help. So she started doing that on the side, if you will. And so I'm observing this. And, you know, when you live together in a one-bedroom apartment in New York City at the time, I can't help but overhear what she's doing. And so I would offer some advice when she asked for it. And long story short, about a year later, she went full-time with that business. And then we kind of had the same idea at the same time as to, well, instead of me doing my thing over here and you doing your thing over here, I have some space. How about, what would it look like if we were to actually partner up? Would that be of value? And so immediately she was like, yes, let's do it, because she knows my background with sales, marketing, entrepreneurship. And I know her strengths as somebody that's she's outstanding with execution and operation and detail. So we complement each other really, really well. So what was going to help her business grow was the things that I did the best. And what was going to help me be of most value to the world was getting out there and telling the world about the great things that she and the people that we hire can do. So that was about a little over 12 months ago that we made that decision.
Okay.
What it's like, some days it's awesome. Some days I question whether it should have ever been done. Again, full transparency.
Sure.
And the reason I sometimes have those days is because what's most important to me is the relationship. And so I don't ever want any business or any pursuit of anything to negatively impact all of the work we've done together over the 25 plus years we've been together.
Yeah.
You know, we've been through so much, it's too important. So on those days where I feel a little bit, where there's extra doubt, you know, sometimes like that fight or flight kicks in and I go, well, maybe we shouldn't do the business. Maybe we should just leave it be. But then as time passes, those are just emotions and feelings, and it's just new. So I have to remind myself it's new. And we're thankfully, we're very good at communication with each other. We've never had an issue with that, probably because of our backgrounds. And, you know, my wife has a recovery story as well. So we were both trained on radical honesty.
Yeah.
That helps a ton, Steve, when you can just say, this is bothering me. Here's why, let's talk about it. Good. Doesn't always go so smooth, but we do talk about it. And so
communication.
It's so important. And then in the business, honestly, like I said to her the other day, the business, nothing that happens in the business is as serious or life-threatening as what we went through before. Like this is a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we want to do well with our clients. Yes, we do. And we also don't need to take everything as if it's a life or death matter. Right. You know, we can play, we can have some fun, we should be enjoying this a little bit more. So we're working on that.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts, whether it's stories or just kind of thoughts or things that you think are important to share with people about life, about acting, about business, or how it all ties together? What would you like to leave us with?
I think for me, just never being afraid to be something outside of a particular box. It's okay to belong to multiple boxes at the same time. Professionally, within your organization, we are human beings having a human experience. Human beings are not meant to be one thing. It would be a pretty boring existence if all we were known for was our job, or if all we were known for was, you know, one thing we said 20 years ago. So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is just the both and philosophy, you know, that I can be a professional performer and a damn good business person.
Yeah.
I can be an outstanding husband and work a really long week. You know, like it's always possible. And the world doesn't always validate that viewpoint. In fact, it becomes, I've seen myself, especially when I had some videos go viral not too long ago that I put out. If people see something in you or you doing something that in some way reminds them of something they're not doing, but maybe want to do, it's much easier for that person to tell you why it's different for you, or why what you're doing is wrong. So just be what you are. If you love business and you love performing, run a business and join a community theater like I did. Like, you can do it. And there's always the other thing that's coming up for me that I should share is the biggest reason I hear for people not to do that is not having enough time. And I say that too. I say, we don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. It just comes out of my mouth sometimes. It's actually not the truth. The truth is it's not a priority for me right now, because if it were, I would make the time for it. Yeah. So being clear on what are the most important things to me, like I said earlier about the relationship being the most important thing to me over this business. So that means if push comes to shove, if my wife needs me as a husband and I have a client that needs me and I have to pick one, that the wife's always going to win. You know, so it's not that I don't have time for the client. It's that that's not the priority right now. Yeah. So just knowing what that is for you. So if you're the type of person that needs to express yourself through music, you don't have to join a band to express yourself through music. What can you make a priority? Can you buy a guitar? Can you buy a little keyboard? Can you record yourself singing something? I get fired up about that because almost always when I share my story, and you may get some of these comments in the YouTube as well, people say things like, must be nice, wish I could do that. Yeah, but he's this and I'm that, so I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can, but you don't have to do it. My pie chart looks different than your pie chart. So figure out what your pie chart is and do it all. Maybe this week it's 50%, 20%, 20%, that didn't add up to 100, but you get the point.
Right.
And then next week it shifts.
Yeah.
It's all okay. But when I was the most depressed is when I was like, well, I'm just a business guy. I can't do anything outside of this lane. And it just led me to a dark place. So that's why I'm so fired up about it.
I love that. Sean Cullen Carroll, you mentioned earlier when you were sharing some of your story, you said that you often get the private messages after you share saying, thank you for sharing, because I can see myself in some of that. Well, I'm going to say it right here. Thank you for sharing. It's special to hear your stories. I think it resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. So thank you very much for being with us on Coffee Breaks, and looking forward to the next conversation.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks for the invite. This was fun.
All right. Conversation with Sean Cullen Carroll. A fascinating guy, and I love the fact that, somebody who on the surface you do look at it and go, man, this guy's done it all. And you do kind of almost get the impression that it just has all come together for him. But then you hear more of his story and you find out, just like the rest of us, he's continuing to work at understanding himself and at becoming. And so I had the opportunity before this conversation that we recorded to get to know Sean a little bit. We spent some time connecting, getting to know each other, and a connection that we're going to maintain, because we have a lot in common, and there's a lot I know I can learn from Sean, and looking forward to an ongoing relationship. I want to very quickly thank you, first of all, for being here and being a part of the conversation. We'll share some things that are coming up, and basically want to let you know that next week we're going to have a live conversation with an author by the name of Sid Niemeyer. I've known Sid for a number of years now, and knew him not as an author, but as someone who, as a pastor in a church that we attended for a number of years, the executive pastor at that church, but also as a scientist. And just one of those people, lots of times you think scientists are going to be dry. Sid is not at all a dry individual in terms of communication, in terms of his story, in terms of his style. You're going to enjoy getting to know Sid next week. You're going to enjoy hearing his story, and you're going to enjoy hearing about the novel that he's written. He's now in the process of getting published. And to me, it sounds intriguing. And I think you're going to be intrigued as well and want to know more about this as he gets ready to put it out to the public. I want to remind you that I look to you. Sean Cullen Carroll came because of an introduction from a mutual friend, and found out that it's a small world because I found out he knows a couple of my friends. And you can provide information to me about topics you would like to see on Coffee Breaks and guests you would like to see us have a conversation with. So please take advantage of that and share your ideas. No idea is unimportant. I take them all and appreciate your creativity and your being a part of the community and part of the conversation. And then a reminder that episodes of Coffee Breaks with Steve are available beyond Facebook and YouTube, even on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. But that YouTube channel is very important. We're looking to expand our presence there. So if you're not already subscribed to and looking at the Coffee Breaks with Steve YouTube channel, I would invite you and ask you to do that so that we can continue to spread the word about the conversation. And just once again, want to thank you for being here, for being a part of Coffee Breaks with Steve, even when we're on the road and even when you are. So thank you for those of you who are traveling and took the time to join us today. And just want to ask you to please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. You can do it. We all can make a difference. We all have something in us that can be a part of someone else's story as well as expanding our own. So do find that opportunity to make a difference and to be the difference. God bless you. Have a great week, and we will see you next time on Coffee Breaks with Steve.